A tumultuous 24 hours for Milan and Massimiliano Allegri. A 2-1 defeat to Cagliari on the final day of the Serie A season at the San Siro meant they dropped out of the top four and will not play in the Champions League again next season. And the ownership group have moved very swiftly to react. Here's part of the statement they've just posted to the club website. With last night's disappointing loss in the final game turning the season into an unequivocal failure, effective immediately, we are parting ways with CEO Giorgio Furlani, Sporting Director Igli Tare, Head Coach Massimiliano Allegri and Technical Director Geoffrey Moncada. It's Adam Hunt and Tony Meola here in the Golazo Network studio. Tony, Milan's your club. Was this the only response they could make?
Yeah, it is the only response. I'm a little bit surprised that they did it so quickly, but I think clearly after watching yesterday and failing at the #1 objective of the club, which was to get the Champions League, they almost had no other choice. So with a World Cup coming up and everyone getting busy in the summer, clearly they'll look at this and say, okay, we got to make changes. We got to make them now. This is a group of players. And keep in mind, the one thing that wasn't included in that is the fact that Zlatan Ibrahimović, who's a senior advisor to RedBird Capital, is a guy that's going to stick around, right, at the club. And some could make the argument that part of the group that is getting fired today is part of the group that he helped hire to get to the club. But they've got to go in a different direction right now. And I think it's been clear. And Max Allegri from the top, he had spoken all year about this objective, and it's finished top four. And that's all we're worried about. When you fail at the #1 objective for a club the size of Milan, I'm not surprised that this happened.
Was this the call that needed to be made from the perspective of the AC Milan fans?
100%. And I think Allegri's words can be used against him in this scenario, right? What did Allegri say all season long? He said, we have to compete for top four for Champions League. That is our goal. That's the objective of the season. You didn't get your goal. You didn't get your objective. So for me, it's the absolute right call. And reading the RedBird statement, the addition, because there was a longer statement than that, it was that they said there was a concrete chance to compete for the Scudetto for much of the season. Allegri also did not say that, at least in the media. He kept saying the goal is top four. You aimed for one thing. You didn't achieve that. And it's not like there was any basis of a style of football that they could say, all right, we see where this team is going. They regressed. They went from a chance of competing for Scudetto. They had very little style of play. Their best players got worse. Pulisic didn't score in 2026. Leão hasn't scored since March. And they're out of Champions League football, something that we thought was unimaginable. Are
you surprised that at the time period here and how quickly they went about it?
For Italian football standards, I know what you mean, Tony. But what this shows me is that this was on the cards for some time. I felt like they understood and they knew, hey, if we're not making it this far, if we're out of Champions League, we already know what it is. And again, just using those words against him. Even getting into a Champions League the way that they were, I think that you had to have question marks about the project. I genuinely think there's an argument to be made. And Tony, you could tell me if you agree with this, that even if they made Champions League, what would they have done going forward in Champions League playing this style of football? There was nothing that they could put the basis of their season on. I guess it is interesting that they got rid of everyone all at once. I think that's very clear that the statement needs to be different, the statement from within the club. And I think the biggest thing that Milan need to understand, because it's very easy to just blame Allegri, it's certainly not all on the coach. The way that this team was managed, the way that this team was built was not good enough. And I think that is the message. The sporting director's gone, CEO is gone. Milan need a proper project. They need a plan. They need, #1, to identify what's the style of football that we want to go. How do we build players for that? And then how do we go along with a coach that fits that? Because if you just look at their last 4 coaches, they went from Pioli to Fonseca, to Conceição, to Allegri. Those are really different styles of football, spending big money on certain players that then don't fit the next coach that you bring on. So this is a way for them to reset, to regroup, to figure out what is their structure, what is their identity.
You know, reset, one of the things we looked at over the last couple of years was the role of Zlatan Ibrahimović. For a while, we didn't even know what his title was. I think he's listed as senior advisor now to RedBird Capital. What do you make of him being around, and how much of this, it seems from the outside looking in that they are going to lean on him a little bit. How much of this rebuild, let's call it, at least a rebuild in the staff, do you think he has control over?
I think that this shows that he will be having a lot of power. And I think, Tony, it's such a good thing that you mentioned that. He is a senior advisor to RedBird. He's not technically an employee of AC Milan, right? I think that he helps Jerry Cardinale in the decision makings, the day-to-day, and it felt like the team was not lined up for what Zlatan Ibrahimović wants. Clearly, right? He was not happy with the direction. We had the chance to be with Zlatan for a long time, and at least from our perspective, from what we saw, he has a big vision for the club. He wants to build out the youth structure. He feels so passionate about getting young Italian players through their Milano Futuro system where they're going to be playing and they could develop players, and players like Bartesaghi could be getting into the squad. So maybe that is the vision. The vision is to play a better brand of football, get another new sporting director, and get a coach that aligns with that vision. But certainly interesting that they do keep Zlatan Ibrahimović. And you have to say, he is just the advisor to ownership. He is not directly a Milan director. People like to compare him to Maldini, but it's a very different role that he has in this Milan team.
What's your inclination about the direction that they go in now? Who are the names that potentially might be interested in coaching at Milan, and who the club should be looking at to get some success finally and potentially next season get back into the Champions League?
I want to see a proper idea of football. Somebody that's courageous, that could bring a style of football that even if they don't get the results in the immediate year, it's not that you have to win the Scudetto in your first year, but we want to see them build something that's sustainable. I thought it was really interesting after the match. I listened to what Cagliari's coach Pisacane, who by the way, Cagliari took a big risk getting Pisacane, first-time coach. He said, today we showed to the rest of Italy that it is not about being better on paper. It's about who shows more heart, more determination, and who wants it more in that moment. And I want to see a Milan coach that could bring that attitude. So maybe somebody younger, maybe someone unexpected, someone that has proven that they have an idea of where they want to build. Obviously, it's easy to look at the likes of what Fabregas has built at Como and say, let's try to emulate that. But they need to be really clever. But the first thing, that holy trinity, that marriage between ownership, director, and coach, that's the first thing they need to solve. What is the football? How do we want this team to look, not just next year, but in 3, 4, 5 years from now?
You could admit to the fact that I've told you for months I don't believe in this group, right? What I saw from January on, I didn't believe this group was going to make Champions League. If they did, it was going to be close. How far away do you think this roster is?
You were right about that, Tony, and it's just so ironic because a few months ago at the early March when they beat Inter in the derby, we were saying, okay, can they get back into a Scudetto race? Because they were playing with no European football. They should. It's incredible that they failed even without that. Too many players that are not playing in the right formation, sticking players in places that they probably didn't belong. I think that there is a lot of changes that do need to be made within this squad. The future of Modric. They still don't have a center forward. They brought Jimenez. He's made headlines for all the wrong reasons, breaking all the worst records possible. Christian Pulisic, does he stay at the club? I have my doubts. Rafa Leão, did we see him play his last game in a Milan jersey? That's why I'm saying it's not the flip of a switch. It's not, all right, yeah, we got rid of Max Allegri. Everything is solved now. There are serious question marks around so many pillars to this team, and they made huge investments last year. The likes of Yashadi for 45 million, Ricci for 25, Estupinian for another 20 million, and Nkunku, who turned out to be one of the better players for this squad. So it's still very early. We don't know who the coach is going to be. That'll certainly have implications on which players they go for. But the biggest thing, they need to play a courageous brand of football. When you're at Milan, when I grew up with Milan, it was beautiful football. It was spectacle. It was enjoyment. It was not the fans booing the team, the fans walking out on the team. It was not being reactive. It was proactive style of football. So they need players who fit that mold.
Marco, just finally, you mentioned it there. You think this maybe pushes Christian Pulisic closer towards the exit door at Milan, or potentially does he stick around to see what direction they go in? Maybe it's someone he sees his career developing under.
Another year of not Champions League football. We had doubts. I remember Tony and I having this conversation a year ago when they finished outside of all European positions, and we said, all right, does Pulisic stay another year? It's a World Cup year. He's not going to be without Champions League football. Now you did it twice. Now you failed twice. You're once again not in the best competition in all of football. And again, there seems like he's not fluid in his position at Milan at this moment. He was played out of position for a lot of the season. He found a way in the first part, and the second part, it just felt like something was not working. Even Leão and him went after each other at one point. Leão was caught on the mic saying, "Oh, he only plays for himself. He doesn't want to pass me the ball." Just so much drama and a lot more question marks. But yeah, at this point, if you're making a bolder prediction, you say you would think that Christian Pulisic's future could be more away from Milan than it is staying at the club.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you very much,
Thanks,
Marco. Brilliant insight as always. So confirmation, CEO, sporting director, technical director, head coach, all out at Milan. What's next? We'll have to wait and see.